They tied the rope rough, the way men do when they don't see a person anymore. Only a problem they want gone. The knot burned into her wrists first, then into her neck. And the wooden beam above the town's breadpost creaked under her weight as the sheriff's deputy stepped back. The crowd had gathered early, boots crunching against dry dirt, whispers spreading faster than the morning wind. Stealing bread, they said, like it was a crime worth killing for. Like hunger was a sin. Her name was Eliza May, though no one bothered to say it out loud anymore. She was just the thief. Her feet barely touched the ground, toes scraping dust as she strained for breath, lungs screaming while the rope cut deeper, faces blurred through the sting in her eyes, women clutching shawls, men with hard mouths, children lifted so they could learn a lesson. Eliza thought of her little brother, buried 2 winters back, starved thin after their mother died. She thought of the loaf she'd taken, still warm when she ran, the smell of yeast and hope clinging to her fingers. She hadn't stolen for greed. She'd stolen to live, but the town didn't care about reasons. Justice here was loud, public, and cruel. The deputy cleared his throat and announced the punishment. His voice steady, practiced, hanging. Not to death, he claimed. Just long enough to break her spirit, long enough to make an example. Eliza's knees buckled. The rope tightened. The sky above was painfully blue, indifferent. That's when the sound of hooves cut through the murmurs, slow, heavy, deliberate. 1 horse. Not a posse. Not the sheriff. Heads turned. Dust rose at the edge of the square as a tall, broad-shouldered rancher rode in, black coat hanging loose, eyes shadowed beneath a worn hat. He looked like a man carved out of loss, widowed, everyone knew it. Jonah Caldwell. He'd buried his wife 3 years ago and buried his words with her. He didn't come to town unless he had to. But today he dismounted without a word, boots hitting dirt like a verdict. He looked up at Eliza, really looked. At the bruises on her wrists, the fear shaking her thin body, the way she fought for every breath. Something tightened in his chest. A familiar ache he thought he'd learned to live with. Hunger, helplessness. He remembered his wife rationing flour during the drought, remembered how close they'd come to the same desperation. The deputy started to speak, but Jonah walked past him. Past the crowd, straight to the post. Someone shouted, "It's justice!" Another yelled, "She stole!" Jonah ignored them all. He reached up, knife flashing in the sun, and sliced through the rope in one clean motion. Eliza collapsed into his arms, coughing, sobbing, alive. The square exploded with noise, anger, shock, outrage, but Jonah held her steady, his voice low and iron hard as he looked at the men who'd watched her suffer. "If bread is a crime," he said, "then hunger's the judge here, and I don't answer to it." He draped his coat around her shoulders, shielding her from the stares. Someone demanded payment. Someone threatened jail. Jonah finally turned, eyes cold. "Put it on my account," he said, then softer to Eliza alone. He pressed the loaf he'd bought on the way in into her trembling hands. "Eat first." The words broke something open inside her. She took a bite through tears, the taste of bread mixing with the taste of survival, as Jonah lifted her onto his horse and rode away under a sky that suddenly felt wider. The town watched in stunned silence, unaware that they had just lost control, and that a story far bigger than a stolen loaf had only just begun. The ride out of town felt unreal, like a dream Eliza was afraid to wake from. Jonah's horse moved steady beneath them, each hoofbeat carrying her farther from the rope. The crowd, the shame. She clutched the loaf to her chest even after it was gone, fingers trembling as if it might vanish too. Jonah didn't speak at first. He rode with the quiet of a man who had already said all he needed to the world. Only when the town disappeared, behind a bend in the road, did he slow the horse and glance back at her. "You hurt?" he asked, voice low, careful, like sudden noise might break her. Eliza tried to answer but only nodded, tears spilling again, not from pain this time, but from the weight of being seen as human. They reached his ranch by dusk, a wide stretch of land framed by tired fences, and a house that carried the kind of stillness grief leaves behind. Jonah helped her down, his hands firm but gentle, and guided her inside. The house smelled of coffee, leather, and old memories. He sat her at the table, poured water, set down another piece of bread and a bowl of stew. "No one takes food from my table," he said. "You're safe here." The word safe settled into her bones, slowly, cautiously. That night, while she slept, wrapped in a blanket that still carried another woman's careful stitches. Jonah sat awake on the porch, rifle across his knees. He knew towns like that didn't forgive kindness easily. And sure enough, the next morning brought dust and men. The sheriff rode up with 2 deputies, anger sharp in his eyes. He accused Jonah of interfering with justice, of stealing a criminal. Jonah listened, unmoved, then stepped forward. "She stole bread," he said evenly. "I stole her back." The sheriff threatened jail, fines, worse. Jonah didn't raise his voice. "You hang hungry girls in your square," he said. "I bury my dead in this soil. We ain't the same." The standoff drew neighbors, ranch hands, even a few women from town who'd watched silently the day before. One of them spoke up, then another. They talked about children who'd gone hungry, about loaves taken in the night, about fear dressed up as law. The sheriff saw the tide turning and knew when to retreat. He left with a warning that sounded more like defeat. Days passed. Eliza healed slowly. Rope burns fading, trust returning inch by inch. She worked where she could, cooking, mending, learning the land. Jonah never treated her like charity. He paid her wages. He asked her opinion. Sometimes they shared silence, sometimes stories. She told him about her brother. He told her about his wife, how the house had gone quiet after she died, how kindness felt dangerous now. One evening, as the sun burned red across the fields, Eliza baked bread from scratch. When she placed it on the table, Jonah froze, eyes dark with memory. She broke the loaf, handed him the first piece, and smiled through tears. "Eat first," she said. Something inside him finally let go. Word spread. The town's story changed. No longer just about a thief, but about a rope cut too. Soon, and a rancher who reminded people that mercy was louder than fear. Eliza stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she chose to, and in that quiet ranch house. 2 broken lives learned how to be whole again, one shared meal at a time. Peace never arrives all at once, it tests you first. The ranch settled into a rhythm that almost felt like healing, but beneath it ran a quiet tension, like a storm building beyond the horizon. Eliza sensed it in the way Jonah scanned the fence lines each morning, in how his hand lingered near his rifle when riders passed on the distant road. Kindness had embarrassed the town. Mercy had exposed it. And towns, like wounded animals, often struck back. It happened on a Sunday, when church bells echoed faintly across the plains. Eliza was hanging laundry when a rider approached fast, dust trailing behind him like a warning. It was Thomas Reed, the baker's son, the same man who had shouted loudest for the rope. He didn't dismount. He didn't smile. "Sheriff's putting together a charge," he called out. "Aiding a criminal, harboring a thief." Jonah stepped onto the porch beside Eliza, calm as stone. "She's no criminal," he said. "And she's not leaving." Thomas spat into the dirt. "Town don't see it that way." Eliza felt the old fear claw back up her spine, but Jonah's presence anchored her. After the rider left, she expected Jonah to tell her to go, to run before things got worse. Instead, he turned to her and said, "We face this standing." The hearing was set in the same square where she'd nearly died. Walking back into it took more courage than she thought she had. The rope was gone, but the memory hung heavy. Townsfolk gathered again, some curious, some ashamed, some still cruel. Jonah stood beside Eliza, not in front of her, not behind her, with her. The sheriff read the charges, his voice less confident than before. Then something unexpected happened. A woman stepped forward, the schoolteacher. She spoke of children fainting from hunger. A ranch hand followed, then a widow. Then a preacher who admitted the punishment had gone too far. The square filled with truth, uncomfortable and unstoppable. When Eliza finally spoke, her voice shook, but it didn't break. She told them about the bread, about her brother, about the moment the rope tightened and the world decided she didn't matter. Silence fell. The sheriff cleared his throat and dropped the charges. Justice, it turned out, could learn. Not everyone apologized. Not everyone changed. But enough did. Jonah and Eliza rode home under a sky washed clean by wind. Something lighter between them now, not just gratitude, not just protection, but partnership. That night, Jonah added a second chair permanently to the porch. The ranch no longer felt like a place frozen in grief. It felt alive. And Eliza understood then she hadn't just been saved. She had become part of something that would stand. Even when tested again, change doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly. Disguised as ordinary days, the ranch began to feel fuller, not louder, just lived in. Eliza woke before dawn now, not from fear, but from purpose. She learned the land the way Jonah knew it, where the soil held moisture, where the cattle favored shade, where grief used to sit heavy and no longer did. They worked side by side without ceremony. Some mornings they spoke little. Other mornings words came easy, surprising them both. Jonah noticed how laughter returned in small pieces, how the house no longer echoed when a door closed. Eliza noticed how Jonah slept through the night now, no longer jolting awake to ghosts only he could see. But towns remember even when they pretend not to. Supplies grew harder to get. Prices rose when Jonah rode in. Doors closed quicker. One afternoon, Eliza overheard two men whispering outside the general store. Talk of teaching the rancher a lesson, of reminding him where power lived. Fear flickered, but it didn't root itself like before. When she told Jonah, he didn't rage. He didn't retreat. He listened, nodded once, and said, "Then we make sure power sees us clearly." The next week, a drought-stricken family arrived at the ranch asking for work, not charity. Jonah hired them. Then another. Soon the ranch became something else, not just land and cattle, but refuge earned through labor and respect. Bread was baked in larger loaves now. Meals were shared longer. The town watched from a distance, uneasy. When sickness hit in late summer and the doctor refused to ride out, Eliza went herself, returned with medicine, and nursed the children back to health. Word traveled faster than lies ever could. The same square that once held a rope now hosted a quiet reckoning. People began to look away when Jonah passed, not in shame, but in thought. One evening, as the sky burned gold, Jonah and Eliza sat on the porch, shoulders nearly touching. "You could leave," Jonah said finally. "No one would blame you." Eliza looked out at the land, at the life she'd helped build from the edge of death. "I'm not staying because I was saved," she said. "I'm staying because I chose this." Jonah nodded, emotion tightening his throat. For the first time since his wife's passing, the future didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like an offering. In a world that once tried to break her, Eliza had become unbreakable, and in doing so, she had quietly changed everything around her.